Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me. I'm Chef Jeremy with Launch My Health. Tonight's class is called Comfort Kitchen. So we're getting towards the end of our nice warm weather. I know it's nice out there today, but we're getting towards the end. There's nothing better than a warm, cozy kitchen that smells amazing and tastes even better. So this is one of those dishes. We're gonna make a classic Minnesota wild rice soup. With parsnips and carrots and onions, and we're going to deploy a couple of very classic techniques that I'll share with you. And we're also going to tweak a very traditional wild rice soup in that we've cut the heavy cream, the really rich heaviness down considerably. So how did we do that without losing that beautiful richness that we love? Well, we added a little bit of roux into this. And anyway, we'll talk more about that as we go as well. So as always, you guys don't hesitate to use that chat feature. Please use the chat feature in your device and let me know what's on your mind, what you're thinking about, and any questions you might have. And I do have awesome sous chef Amanda here as well behind the scenes. She's gonna help throw those questions at me as well, and we'll get the answers to you in real time. Hopefully you are cooking along with me. You should have received the link to your toolkit, which contains the recipes and the shopping list, as well as the equipment list and any advanced prep list that will need to be done as well. There is a little bit of advanced prep today in the cooking of the chicken, of course, because we do have only an hour to hang out together. And then that wild rice needs to be done as well. And mine is just wrapping up here. As you can see, I've got my wild rice here and it's soaked up all that beautiful liquid and it's just about perfect. I like to kind of let it sit aside and let it sort of rest now, and it just sort of coasts into done. It becomes nice and tender, and your wild rice is becoming done when those grains begin to kind of pop, right? And then they sort of curl, open up a little bit, and then that's a good sign that your wild rice is almost done. So this recipe is a great way to use up extras, use up leftovers. If maybe you've made a wild rice dish, or maybe you just had wild rice for dinner yesterday, make an extra batch so that you have a launch pad for today's dinner as well. And then same thing with the chicken, right? Great way to use one of those rotisseries or use up leftovers. I often will make this with, it doesn't have to be chicken. It could be any poultry, really. You might make it with turkey if you, make a big bird for the holidays, right?
We have a question, Chef Jeremy.
Super. What's that question?
What brand of wild rice do you recommend?
What
from
brand?
Rosabelle?
That is a great question. Give me 1 second. I'm going to actually show you. This one is Gray Owl, it's called. I don't know if you can kind of get in there and see that guy. It's 1 pound premium Minnesota cultivated wild rice, all natural product. So, and I actually do really like this one. So yeah, that's the one that I'm using. I don't know, does anybody else have any suggestions? One that they really love? Wild rice does, as long as we're kind of talking about this, does take a little bit longer to cook than many other rice. And I don't know if you knew this or not, wild rice is not actually rice. It is a member of a different grass family. So kind of just a fun fact for you there. But it does take significantly longer to cook and become nice and tender than most other jasmine or basmati or short grain rices. So just kind of be aware of that. Now, could you swap it out for one of those rice? Sure, you could, right? You're cooking at home, you're in charge. You can make those calls. All right. So with that, we're going to get started here, you guys. And as I alluded to before, we're going to make a roux, and we're going to start with that. A roux is, if you want, right, grab a pen and paper, equal parts by weight, fat and flour. Honestly, it can be any fat. We're going to use butter today. Butter is very traditional. And it could be any flour. I'm using a gluten-free blend that I like right here today. There's not a single grain gluten-free substitute that I like. I've tried so many of them, and there's a lot of them out there, right? Oftentimes for baked goods, they just don't work properly. They don't give you the structure that you want. And in applications like this, a lot of times, unfortunately, it leaves a little bit of graininess behind in that soup base. So I always am going to use a blend. Oftentimes I'll use Bob's Red Mill. Got to give those guys props. They do an amazing job. And this one is by Namaste. And it too is a gluten-free blend, and it's nut free too. So that's the one that I'm using today. To start off, now we're gonna make our roux. So let's get our butter into the pan. And again, equal parts. So for this one, I'm using about 4 ounces of fat and flour. So we're using that butter. Now, this is not to say that you necessarily have to use all of this roux. You could hold some of this back if you wanted to. If you look at this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a ton of butter. It is kind of a lot. But roux is also one of those things, especially as you are getting back to cooking more in your own kitchen, cooking whole fresh foods in your own kitchen. Roux is a great thing just to have around. Okay, it lasts a long, long time. Keep it under refrigeration. And you can take a scoop out whenever you need it as well. So really, really great thing. We're gonna put that butter on about a medium heat here, and I want to just kind of see some bubbling happening. I don't want it to, be so hot that it's browning or burning the milk solids. We are using a whole butter, but I just want to see some bubbling. Beautiful. That's about what we got. And then we're gonna add our flour. Now, you can, and I do recommend when you're starting out weighing, actually, honestly, I know it sounds a little silly, perhaps, being that precise with something like this, but to really, begin to understand what a roux should be like, what it should look like, it's not a bad idea to get yourself, a scale. You can get them pretty affordably and weigh them out. Because a volume measure, fat versus flour, a ground thing, is very, very different. If you weigh them, that's how we're going to be super accurate. Now, did I weigh mine? No. I've been doing this for 100 years, and I know what I'm looking for. But I also want to show you, this is what you want right here. Now, they often call this like wet sand looking, and that's kind of what we've got right here. Okay, now to make a white roux, we're going to continue to cook this, to simmer this for about 2 minutes. Okay, so it's got to be bubbling. I want to see some bubbling action. And what that's going to do is it's going to just cook the kind of the harsh, raw edge off of that starch or off of that flour. And then it's done. It's that simple. And again, you can, cool this and store this and use this to thicken really any liquid you want to. We're gonna let that go ahead and finish. Now, while this is finishing, let's run through all of our ingredients and the rest of our equipment that we have pulled out here, just so that we can make sure that you guys have everything pulled and are ready to cook along with me. I just wanted to get our roux started here. So I have the typical culprits. I do have my cutting board. I have my chef knife here. I have my sanitizer towel. I have a few tasting spoons. I do have a plate, just a prep plate. I'm going to put my prep on this plate here. I have my chives, my mushrooms. Way over here, I do have my chicken, and my chicken is already pulled. We'll talk more about how we got here. If you want to cook it start to finish, in your kitchen, you certainly can. But again, as I was saying, a great way to use up leftovers here too, in something like this. I do have my cream here. We're just using a small amount of heavy cream. Yes, we're using real heavy cream. You can switch that over to half and half as well if you want to. But I just pulled it back significantly from most wild rice recipes, and keeping it as natural as possible. I have a soft spatula. I have my peeler. I have right here. So this is cheesecloth. This is a little kind of bolt, if you will, of cheesecloth. And then I have my just a butcher's twine, any little string like this you can use. I do have my kitchen shears here. We're gonna make a sachet today as well. That's that really classic thing I was telling you about. Don't let your roux burn. Kind of stir it around a little bit as it cooks for that 2 minutes. And mine is probably just about where I want it. So we're gonna turn that. I have my celery here. I have my turnips. I have my carrots. I have my onion, my salt well, as always. I do have my stock right here. And obviously my small saute pan. Behind me, I do have the wild rice again in the saucepan. And I have my Dutch oven here that we're going to use to actually put the soup together. All right. So roux is looking good. That is absolutely perfect. Just what you want it to look like. All right, so we're going to set this aside. Take this off of your burner. If you have one of those burners that stays hot, take it off because it will continue to cook. And if it does continue to cook, you're gonna move it from white roux into brown roux, which is not a bad thing. In fact, we use it for certain dishes, just not for this dish. And that's just continuing to toast the starch or the flour until it begins to kind of caramelize and turn like peanut butter almost, okay? So we have a little bit more prep to do. Let's go ahead next and let's put our sachet together, all right? Sachet, that's what we're making here today. So we're gonna open up just maybe like a, I don't know, 4x4 square will be plenty for you. And you can get this honestly I think I found it at every market I've looked for it. But by their little, they'll all have like half an aisle maybe of the equipment. So you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. I'm just gonna cut it off with my kitchen shears. And if you were to open this up, it's still, even in this state, you could open this up even more, and even the way it is right now, you can just about see through it. So don't open that up though, or all the things we put in here will just gonna fall right through the holes, okay? So in addition to that, I do have my spices measured out here for us. So I'm using dry thyme today. We're gonna use some allspice, whole black peppercorns. Don't use ground pepper because again, it's gonna go right through. We want the essence or the flavor of the peppercorns. I don't want the ground up pieces of the peppercorn in here. And then I have a couple bay leaves here. So we're just gonna go ahead and lay this right in there, just like that. And then we're gonna pull up the ends, the corners, like that, make this neat little bundle, and we'll twist it off real gently. Don't twist it off. Think about, so we're gonna use this like a tea bag almost, right? So I don't want it so tight that my soup base won't be able to easily flow through the bag. In fact, that's exactly how we're gonna use this, just like a tea bag, where we're gonna steep the flavors out of the herbs and spices that we have here. And then we'll pull it out and we'll remove it.
We have a question, Chef Jeremy.
Okay.
What does a bay leaf do? You take it out of all your recipes. Why do you put it in?
Great question. If you didn't hear it, what does a bay leaf do? I take it out of all of my recipes after it's cooked, right? So why do we use it? Well, for exactly the same reason that we were just talking about. We steep it like tea. A bay leaf doesn't necessarily have to go in here because it's a whole leaf and it's pretty hardy. It holds together really well. So I can just pull that out. But if you've ever bitten into a bay leaf, even after you cook it for a long, long time, it's crunchy and hard and very fibrous. So we just want, it's the same exact way and reason that we're using this sachet today. We want the flavor of the bay leaf, but we don't want the body of the bay leaf in our food, just because of its texture. Okay, so awesome question. Thank you for asking that. All right, so our sachet is ready. Let's go ahead and talk about our chicken really quickly. So the chicken is, I seasoned this up and I cooked it off and I pulled it off of the bone. So you have to hit 165 degrees internally to know that your chicken is done. And I just used some salt, roasted it in my oven at about 325, 350, somewhere in there. I use convection. It's not 100% necessary, but if you have convection, I do recommend using it. And then cook it until you get an internal temperature of 165 with an internal probe thermometer in the thickest, fattest part of that chicken. Okay, then take it out of there, set it aside on the countertop for maybe 5 or 10 minutes to let that intense heat come off. And then I put mine right in the refrigerator to get it cool as quickly as possible. And then I pull it. I don't want to hurt my hands. I don't want you to hurt your hands either, right? So then pull it. Again, otherwise, those rotisseries work really well for this. You can get them in so many different places now, or any leftover poultry that you might have kicking around. Perfect used in this soup, okay? Those two are ready. Our wild rice is ready. Let's prep our veggies really quickly here.
How much chicken is that about? This
is actually the whole chicken. And I'm gonna say this is about, everything else removed, skin, bones, connective tissue. This is a pound and a quarter, pound and a half, somewhere in there. It looks like more than it is because it's all flaked apart, right? So yeah, this is about, if you are measuring out, from a larger bird, obviously a whole turkey in here is gonna be a little out of balance. But yeah, so about a pound and a quarter, pound and a half, I think is gonna be good. Good question. For our veggies, go ahead and peel them up. If you peel them, I know a lot of people these days aren't peeling their root veggies, like their carrots and parsnips. And I just have to, my one recommendation for that is if you're not gonna peel them, I do recommend spending the extra buck on them and getting the organic version. Just because without peeling them, you don't have that extra little kind of layer of protection, right? And then still wash them, make sure that they're as clean as possible. And I will always really either fill a bowl or sanitize my sink and fill that about halfway up with water, and then submerge my produce in there, especially roots, because, well, they grow in the dirt, right? And they have little cracks and crevices, and that dirt, you know, when it's wet, it kind of turns to mud and it gets compacted in those cracks and crevices. And so just simply running water over the top of it doesn't do the best job at getting it clean. If you submerge it or soak it, right? I mean, just think about your dirty dishes. You soak them and everything just wipes right off. And that is an old restaurant trick, you guys. That's how we do it in restaurants. Get our food as clean as possible, especially if it's coming like, you know, direct from the farmer or things like that, where it may not have had multiple washes necessarily.
We have a cool comment from Beth G.
Yeah.
She's using a fresh bay leaf from her own garden.
For real, Beth? That is amazing. You have a bay tree? Or is it maybe you got like a little baby? I didn't know they could grow here. Maybe you take it in and out. Tell me more. Tell me more. I'm gonna trim our ends here. Square those off. And here's a great place as well to throw in other veggies. What other veggies do you have? Honestly, anything can go in here. You want to throw some corn in here, some peas in here, or other roots. Do some, honestly, even like golden beets or celery root or turnips. They'll all be right at home in something like this. For our carrots, as you can see, we've got a little size variance here, so we have to kind of manage that, right? This skinny little guy, I'm probably just going to cut up this way into nice little discs. Just like so, making our best effort to be slicing down and forward as opposed to chopping. Always should be slicing when it's possible. So we've got little discs here of this carrot, and this guy, even on this side, is already pretty big. So we're going to take it in half the long way, but before we ever do that, if the thing that we're taking in half is as long or almost as long as my blade, always take it in half the short way first. Okay, now you can look straight down and line up your blade with that carrot, and I just sort of merge them together, just like this. Okay, carrots can be a little tricky and it can be dangerous and they can shift and move on you. So I want you to do this and then remove your hand from the carrot and place a finger or three up on top of the blade to safely complete that cut. You can set them on their flat side, turn them a quarter turn, and now you can go two at a time even, and slice them just like this. The size of the carrot, the size that you choose to cut your carrot isn't incredibly important as long as they're a similar size to one another. So you see we've got the full discs. Now we've switched over to half moon, different shape, but same size, and they'll cook at the same rate. So you can practice that one more time on this carrot, just like so. Remove that hand to a safe place and complete that cut. And if you wanted to now, if your carrot really gets large, you can do that one more time. And here again, we've just created a different shape. But due to the graduation of that carrot as it got bigger, still be very much the same size. All right, so now let's go ahead and store our carrots on our prep device here. It might be a plate, might be a platter, might be a bowl, anything you've got, just to make sure that you retain, room on your cutting board to do cutting. Okay, we're gonna do our parsnips the exact same way. So there's a bit greater of a graduation from the tiny end to the thick end. So we're gonna deploy that same tactic here. Once it gets significantly larger, take it in half that long way. And we'll cut now into the half moons until it becomes significantly larger. And now we'll turn them into those quarters. And here, if it gets to be a lot, just do two at a time, maybe. Always doing our best, doing that slicing motion. And here again, our pieces are similar size. to our carrots because a carrot and a parsnip have similar structure. So again, they'll cook at the same or similar rate. All right, this is great, you guys. This is a great dish to get some knife skills practice on. So do that one more time. You ready? Here we go. Cutting into our discs. And then down the middle. Cut a few half moons. And down the middle once more. All right.
Tips for selecting turnips, Rosabelle asks.
Tips for selecting turnips. That sounds like it should be like a limerick or something. Just like any other root, honestly, you want to look for it to be firm. You want to avoid any signs of spoilage. So if you see any, big color anomalies, like if it's really, it has a brown spot or a gray spot, I'd probably pass by that guy and then pick it up and feel it, right? We never want it to be slimy. Oftentimes it'll be, spritzed in the market from those sprayers. So it's likely going to be wet, but it shouldn't be slimy. We don't want to see any, odd growths happening on it either. So just basically things like that. Look for signs of spoilage. If honestly, even, if it smells off, if it smells funky, keep walking by that one as well. But yes.
Judy thanks you for the great cutting tips.
Awesome. You're welcome, Judy. Thank you.
And Michelle has a question about being vegetarian. What other veggies would you add in place of the chicken? She says she's also going to use veggie stock too. Yes,
absolutely. And those are great that is a great substitute, veggie stock. Honestly, for this, you could even use water. If you have a veggie stock that you like, use that. Other veggies in place of the chicken, I would probably go to like a bean or a legume to, substitute some of that protein personally. A lentil, any bean you could do. I would do chickpea in this. I don't think there's a wrong answer in regards to beans or legumes, getting some of that in here. It's also going to bring a little bit of the texture maybe that you would be removing if you were, if and when you remove the chicken. So yeah, that's what I would do as well. Load it up with other veggies too. You want to get some bell peppers in here. Like I said, there's no wrong answer in this one. It's so incredibly versatile. I don't often say this, but I'll use this dish to kind of clean out the refrigerator sometimes. It's a great thing, right? We paid money for that. We wanna get some benefit from those foods too. So awesome question. I hope
Michelle says thank you. She didn't even think of that.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad that helped. Super. Okay, so onion is next. We have this little pointy end here, and then we have this scraggly little root end. For that pointy end, we're gonna take a nice little slice off, enough to expose each of the rings in there. And don't try to peel your onion yet, okay? Peeling an onion when it's whole is too difficult. Spin it around and just shave off that root side, keeping that core, that kind of hard core intact. All right, and now set it on its large flat side, and we're gonna go right through the center of that core. And now is when we peel. When an onion is taken in half, you have all these wonderful edges to grab onto. And so it peels incredibly easy. As this one makes me eat my words. No, way easier than when it's whole. If you've ever struggled peeling an onion, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we do want to get all that brown stuff off. Get rid of that. Make sure that root ball is gone, and then storing an onion. You guys, never ever. Even if you only are going to use half of this onion, I would recommend dicing it all and then storing it. But if you don't want to do that, at least get rid of any of the brown stuff, any of the part of the onion that was once in contact with dirt or with growing medium. Okay, because if any part of this onion is contaminated with microorganisms, right? Pathogens, illness-causing microorganisms, it's going to be that outside skin or that root ball. So if I were to just take this in half, leave that brown skin on there and that half a root ball in there, throw it in a Ziploc bag and seal it up, I just locked this beautiful, pristine onion in that same space as all of those microorganisms. It increases the spoilage ×2 easily. You can extend the life of your, cut into produce by 2 times. You'll double its life just by getting rid of all that. We're using them both today. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna set it with that solid core away from me. I'm gonna cut down to the board, always cutting towards the center, but not through this core up on top here. And what that's gonna do for me is help me maintain control. I have these fingers, okay, but I still have control because that has been kept intact there. So I got a couple little pieces fell off. So then we're just gonna turn it, and now the fingers are all pointing towards my knife. And so we're gonna slice. Super. And that is the best way to dice an onion. So all of our pieces are same or similar size. I just have this little core left, and that guy can just go into my trim bowl. All right. Now let's go ahead and let's start heating up our pan. So grab that Dutch oven, and let's get a little bit of heat on there. And then to that, I'm gonna add my roux. Beautiful. Now I measured mine pretty close, and I've done this several times, so I'm gonna use all my roux. But again, like I said, if you wanted to make extra, just hold a little bit back. And that works really well. And then as soon as that roux starts to kind of bubble again, we're gonna get our liquid in there, and we're gonna basically get everything in there except the cream and the chives. We're gonna bring that up to a simmer and let it simmer until the veggies are tender. This is incredibly simple. There are a lot of different wild rice recipes out there. I wrote this one with simplicity and ease in mind, okay? Let's go back as we're waiting for that to heat up, and let's finish prepping our onion. So we're gonna do that other half again, same way, okay? Solid core pointing away from me. The tip of my knife is pulled back, and I'm gonna slice, always cutting towards the center. When I'm halfway through it, I should be going straight up and down. And then I'll back again towards that center. All right, turn it a quarter turn, and we'll do that same thing this way. So we have these nice cubes, nice little squares of onion. If you want, you can even get after, there's a little bit left on that core. You can kind of get after, but the core, always do remove that core. There is a piece in there that's really kind of hard and fibrous, so we'll always get rid of that. All right, onions can come over onto our prep plate here.
Question for you.
Yes.
How do you know what onion to use with which recipes, from yellow to white to red?
Another fantastic question. So how do we know what kind of onion to use for what recipe, right? Because there are lots of different ones out there. You mentioned yellow, white, red. There's also sweet onions, right? Sweet Vidalia onions. Love those. If you've never tinkered around with those, go ahead and grab some of those and try them out. There's not a I'm gonna say there's not a hard and a fast rule. You must use this for this dish. They're all similar enough that I wouldn't feel bad swapping one out for the other if I happen to have one in my pantry, rather than going, making a trip to the store and buying a white versus a yellow. In speaking in broad terms, a white onion is often going to be kind of the most mild. A yellow is going to be a little bit more kind of acidic. If you really love onions, you'll like the yellows. If you're kind of on the fence about it, or if someone is kind of on the fence, you might swap the yellow or the red out for a white onion, as it will be a little bit more mild. When it comes to using the reds, color is something to keep in mind, right? Because it does have the anthocyanin in it, which is what makes it red, and that will bleed out into things. So if you're making a soup or a sauce that's on the kind of the white side or the lighter side, you don't want to make sure you don't get like a pink tint into it. I would choose something other than the red onion. And the sweet Vidalia, again, there's many different. It's not only Vidalias. There are other breeds of sweet onion. I put those things in everything. They're so good. And don't get me wrong, you're not going to eat it. It's not going to be like candy, right? But it just has a little extra sweetness, especially if you're going to caramelize them. Maybe that little tiny bit of extra sweetness caramelizes beautifully. So great question. Thank you for asking that. And then in addition to those guys too, you've got leeks, you've got scallions, you've got Chives is a member of the onion family. So it's a broad family. And it's actually, the whole family is called the allium family. And there are some pretty significant health benefits to those guys too. So excellent. Thank you for asking that. And that's a beautiful segue. I talked just long enough. My roux has begun to bubble. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pour in my stock here. And you can go all in if you want. I'm going to go a little bit slowly just to help that roux kind of distribute. Okay. Now, the next thing to keep in mind about your roux, you guys, is that roux has to simmer. Okay, so it has to reach that temperature in order for it to thicken. Okay, so I used to teach culinary school at a culinary college, right? And the students would come to me and they're like, "Chef, I added 5 times the roux. It won't thicken. What's wrong with my roux?" And we would, have a little discussion. We talk about, we go back to the station, and we've discovered, well, it never actually simmered. Simmering reaches about 212 degrees, and bubbles actually form in the liquid. Okay, something that happens there. The starch particles gelatinize, they bloat up at that temperature, and that's how they thicken a liquid. If you never reach that temperature, your roux is just going to look clumpy and odd like this. Okay, and it's never going to thicken your liquid. So that's a long story to drive home the point that you have to bring your, whether it's a soup or a sauce or whatever it is, you must bring it up to that simmering stage before the roux will engage and do its work, do its job. Okay. All right. So, and we're coming up. You can see we've got some steam. I'm just going to go all in now. There we go. And here again, you can really kind of see. I wonder if I can get a better view for you, perhaps. Yeah, there's just clumps of the roux in there. There we go. It looks like a dumpling, kind of, right? A sad dumpling. Okay. You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. Okay. It's just waiting for that liquid to come up to that temperature that we need, and then it will become creamy and beautiful. All right, so we've got just a little bit more prep to do here. But as this is temping up, let's go ahead and let's get our veggies in there. Our prep, so we've got our onions, our carrot, and our parsnips. Let's get those guys in there. Our chicken is already cooked. Our wild rice is already cooked. That's why, again, like the final assembly of this is an awesome, awesome thing. Maybe you, are out working all day. You can come home and throw something like this together, and pretty quickly, right? As opposed to starting from scratch with the chicken and the wild rice and all that. So we do have to prep our celery yet, and this is really long. So I'm going to take my celery now into thirds, just like this again, because we never want it to be as long or almost as long as my blade. And for this little guy here, I have a little kind of a dry end there. Let's trim that off. And then we're going to go in half the long way. We'll turn it, and now we'll slice it this way. And again, we're doing our best to make our pieces same or similar size. Bottom of that guy. And now this is so, quite a bit bigger than that last piece. So I might cut this guy into thirds. Like so. All right. Slicing it up. Now celery too is one of those things that, it has that, almost woody, fibrous component to it. So if you're, sensitive to that, or if you're cooking for people that are sensitive to that, don't give up on the celery, right? Celery is a good thing. It has some good health benefits, great source of fiber. Cut it smaller. If you cut it smaller, those fibers that are in there, your knife will cut them very small instead of, you or your loved one trying to chew through them. You won't even hardly notice that they're there. So that's my little recommendation. For this, we're just going to go right into our pot here. Just like so. And I am on high with my little burner here. And yep, it is starting to get nice and creamy for me. Beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and get our sachet in there as well. The sooner we get that in, the sooner the flavors can be pulled out of that sachet and into our soup base. Let's prep our mushrooms next. You can do whatever you want with these, to be honest with you. If you, again, are kind of on the fence about the mushrooms, you can cut them up nice and small. I like them. So I'm probably just gonna, I might just take them in half or maybe quarter them like that. But that, again, is totally up to you. Mushrooms have a very high moisture content. So, they're gonna cook, they're gonna become tender pretty quick. We won't be waiting on them too long, which is why, again, that the size of these guys doesn't matter nearly as much as if we were adding other roots to the mix, right? Because, again, their composition is just very different and their cook rate is very different. All right. In regards to mushrooms too, I'm just using these cute little button mushrooms here. Very versatile, easy to find, they're everywhere. If you want to maximize the health benefit of mushrooms, because yes, there is health benefit to mushrooms. What I found is, in my research, is that the Japanese style mushrooms, so like your enokis, your shiitakes, things like that, generally are going to have, a good amount more of the health benefit. So just a fun fact for you.
Question, you don't need to remove the stems?
Stems of the mushroom. So do we need to remove the stems of the mushrooms? Another fantastic question. For these, no. Now, if they had, big, long, thick, woody stems on them, I would trim them off. These guys, this was probably the longest one. And it's fresh, it's a fresh cut. It doesn't look dried out. It's not super long. It's not like, half the size of the mushroom. So no, for these, I definitely don't. Now, for mushrooms like the shiitake that I just mentioned, shiitake specifically have very woody stems. So I guess you have to kind of know. So again, I'm glad you asked this. Shiitakes have a very woody stem, and I don't care how long you cook them. You could braise them all day long. I had a student leave them into a braise one time, and they still were like, I don't even know how to describe it. I once said bubblegum, but it was harder than that. They never become tender, and it's not pleasurable. So make sure you remove those stems. Again, others like these, portobellas, the enokis, all of those have very tender stems. So no, I would not remove them. That would be, you'd be losing a lot of product there. Yeah, so great question. As you can kind of see here, we're getting nice and creamy. I'm getting some steam coming off, which tells me that, yep, we're getting to that temperature that we want. And once we see this steam, we also know that, again, just like our tea, that the flavor is being steeped out of the black pepper, the bay leaf, all of those goodies. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's get our mushrooms in there. Let those guys go to work. Let's prep our chives here. Chives are an amazing thing. Does anybody grow chives? I'm just curious. Or has anybody ever? I moved into a house once, years ago. I was renting a home. And I think we moved in like winter or something. And spring came, right? And there was just, the backyard was just a mound of chives. It was amazing. So beautiful. The chive blossoms too, right? They're the bright, beautiful purple. And you can eat those. You could use those for garnish too. So very natural. They grow like crazy here. They grow like weeds here in Minnesota. So kind of cool. But they'll take over other things too if you're trying to. So container garden, I think would probably be the best for chives. For these guys, all I'm going to do is I'm going to slice them nice and thin the short way here, which is going to give me these kind of cute little rings. And I think in the recipe I just said, add these all to the soup. You can certainly do that. But if you wanted to, you could set aside, I don't know, 10 or 20%, a tablespoon or two, and you could do a little garnish. Use these for a little garnish if you wanted to as well. In fact, maybe we'll do that here for you guys, because I always like to plate. All right, and the rest of it, yep, I'm getting some bubbling action in there. The rest of our chives are going right in here. Beautiful. All right, let's give that a little stir. Oh man, this is going to be delicious. And that bright pop of green, it's really beautiful too. So let's get our rice in here. We're going to kind of put our final touches on here. We're almost done. Let's get our rice in there, make it official. Yum. Now you can adjust your texture here too. Again, as I said, in comparison to most wild rice recipes, I pulled a lot of the fat out of it in the form of the cream. It's a little bit in, but pulled a lot of it out. So if you prefer it to be, thicker and creamier, you certainly can, just use a little bit more of your roux to make it a little bit thicker and a little bit creamier. All right, beautiful. So we're gonna taste now, you guys. Always, we should be tasting our food when we're cooking at home, okay? Highly recommend it. For something like this, I might taste multiple times. So rather than going through, a whole bunch of spoons and working safely, of course, right? I'm gonna show you how you can taste the same dish all day long without contaminating the dish, okay? So we're gonna have 2 spoons. And I'm gonna get into the dish with one of my spoons. I'm gonna grab a little bit of that soup base, and I'm gonna move away from the vessel, not over the top, because it could splash. Move away and pour it into my other spoon. Don't touch the 2 spoons, pour it into that 2 spoons. And we do this in the restaurants all the time too. Taste that guy, okay? This one's contaminated, right? This one can go back into the soup. So we can taste it again if we want. Go back in, move over, drop it onto the other spoon, and you can taste all day long. And what my taste is telling me is we need some more salt in there. So we're gonna adjust that salt. Yum. And I do recommend, again, super important to be tasting that food, because we all, yes, I write of, a quantity of salt to be added to most dishes, but really important as you're, building your kitchen skills to taste it and decide where you want the salt to be, right? Each and every one of us has a slightly different affinity for salt. So fine tune it for you and your family. You don't have to put exactly the same amount of salt in the dishes that I do, right? Maybe you want a little less, maybe you want to touch more.
Rosabelle says that's very smart. And Judy asks, love the salt crock. Where did you find that?
The salt crock, my little salt well. Yeah, we didn't talk about that, did we? I want to say it was the Target. Yes, it's the Threshold. I think that's Target's brand, right? Yep, Target. Really cool though, right? Always, you guys, salt in a salt well. Salt shaker, jokingly, right? But if you have a salt shaker, I want you to go and get it, okay? And I want you to wrap it up neatly and give it to someone you don't like very much. No, they're just not good tools. They're inconsistent. You can't be accurate with it. It's really hard to know exactly what you're adding. I always use my fingers in the salt well. Super. I'm glad you like that. Thank you. Okay, so we made an adjustment here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to stir it up here, and then I'm going to taste it again. You always must taste it again after you make an adjustment, because you don't know exactly what the impact was. So when I place my 2 spoons as well, so I remember which is which, I place them like this. And I just have it in me. My right hand goes into the food, my left hand goes in my mouth. So I always remember which is which here. Delicious. And besides all that, tasting food is just the best, right? I'm telling you, that's why I became a chef in the first place. Okay, salt should be good. We've got just about everything in here. Let's go ahead and add our chicken. Again, all we need to do is really reheat our chicken. Check it out. I'm gonna fold that up a little bit. Mine got a little thick, so I'm gonna add a little bit more liquid here. You can make those fine-tuning adjustments as well as you're working. Now be a little cautious with that sachet in there, right? You don't have to not touch it, but just make sure you're not beating it up, right? So, because that cheese cloth is pretty delicate. And we're gonna let this simmer for a little bit, okay? Now the longer you let this simmer, the more tender the veggies are gonna become, and the more flavor you're gonna get out of that sachet as well. Before you serve it, make sure and pull that sachet out, and I'll give it a little squeeze and then remove it. Okay, you can toss it. So there is our dish, you guys. We're done a little bit early even, other than letting this finish. And then just before you serve it, I stir in the cream here too. So as this simmers, I don't like to cook, and some people will, and they get away with it. But I don't like to like vigorously boil or even simmer dairy. It scares me a little bit, because dairy is a relatively high protein food. protein is always drawn towards the heat source. Where's the heat source if we're cooking on a cooktop? The bottom of my pan. You've all seen this if you've ever made like even like a hot chocolate, right? You know that if you do that too quickly, the protein from the dairy burns on the bottom of your pan. That can happen here too. So be cautious. I always just kind of sort of stir this in at the very end so that I don't have to worry about that. Otherwise you have to, make sure your heat's not too high, turn it down, feel the bottom of your pan. If you do get that formation though, let it be. Don't get in there and try to scrape it off vigorously because it's not great and it's gonna be a weird texture. It could even throw your flavor. So you can either just leave it there if your dish is almost done, right? And then just clean it off after you get done with it. Or if you have to cook it for a significant amount of time yet, what I would do is take a different pot and put your dish in that and then get rid of that one that had scorched on the bottom. So
just to clarify, we're supposed to add the cream off the heat?
Yes, I would turn at the very end, right? When everything, you'll check your veggies. Let's do that, in fact, right? We've got some time here. Pull out one of your roots, one of your veggies with your tasting spoon, right? Try it out. My carrot's a little crunchy yet, okay? And I like to give it a little bit more time. Maybe 10 or 15 more minutes, I would say, would be ideal here. Just to get those veggies tender. Let the sachet, extract the flavor. Then turn your heat off. Stir in your cream. Garnish with your reserved chives here, and you're done. Okay. I'm gonna let mine cook a little bit here, you guys. All right, because mine is a little bit under, needs about 10 more minutes. Any questions for me? What do you got? Throw them at me.
What is your favorite way to create shredded chicken?
Favorite way to create shredded chicken? Probably what is written into this recipe. When I was a kid, my grandmother there was always a chicken soup, chicken something or other, right? And she would boil them. And it's not bad. I don't want to put that, out there. But me personally, I find that when we roast things, when we deploy a dry cooking technique, such as roasting, then we get that caramelization, we get a little more interest, a little bit more appeal in that chicken. So both ways are fine. You can, boil it, roast it, grill it, whatever you want to do. But if you're doing it specifically, with the intention of pulling it, I would roast it personally. Yep. Great question.
What would you serve with this?
What would I serve with this? Gosh, a beer? No, no, I'm not sure. So probably traditionally, you could do like a crusty bread. You could do, grill, a nice crusty piece of bread. Serve this with a sandwich. Serve it with, a salad just to get kind of a little bit more variety in there, because this is really warm and cozy and you just want to kind of sink into it. So something like that, fresh, crisp, and bright will bring some balance to it as well. So.
Does wild rice get mushy if it's cooked too long?
Does wild rice get mushy if it's cooked too long? I haven't seen it happen yet. It probably will, but it is almost foolproof. It's really difficult, I think, to overcook wild rice. It's very forgiving. Even once it pops open, you've all seen that it kind of almost pops like a popcorn sort of, right? Even once it pops open, it still retains a really nice texture for quite some time. So this would be a great one too, like because of that, if you wanted to freeze some wild rice, even once it's cooked, you can do that because freezing often, sort of degrades the texture of foods, but wild rice is so hearty and so robust that that's pretty fun.
If you want to add some big, bold flavors to this, what would you add?
Big, bold flavors to this? So I would back up this process a little bit, and before we add the stock, I'd get some acid in here, to be honest with you. I would do either like some lemon juice, some lime juice, and you could still do it, it's not too late now. Or even like a nice dry white wine would be really, really good in here as well. So that's kind of where I would start with some acid. And then if you want, there's so many different ways we could go. If you're a heat person, You could turn in like, some chipotles. I would go chipotle over like fresh chili in here. I think the smoke that you get from the chipotle would be amazing in here. I actually haven't done it, but that jumps into mind. Yeah, the sky's the limit. Absolutely.
What's your opinion of cultivated wild rice versus hand harvested, aside from the cost?
Yeah, cost is always going to be a thing with that. So cultivated versus hand harvested or wild harvested, always is the more natural we can get with our foods, the better, I think, in my opinion. So, but again, the cost it's a big factor. Finding it, availability is a big factor. So I often get asked this question in regards to salmon too, right? Wild versus farmed salmon. And there's just simply more to consider than just this or that, right? There is availability, there's cost, was it frozen, right? All of these things. And then it comes down to just, is there one that you like better too? Because there are different breeds, different varietals of wild rice. And some of them are really robust and might even, maybe turn some people off, and others, are a little bit more tender. So again, just to recap, I would, personally, if they're side by side, cost isn't an issue, and I like both of them, I'm going to reach for the, the wilds, but I don't want to turn anyone off from purchasing, a nice farm product either.
Would tofu work in this soup?
Yeah, you could definitely do tofu. So the question was, would tofu work? You definitely could. I would save that until the very end, unless you want it to fall apart. So you've stumbled upon another one of my tricks, you guys. You can also, in order to attain a creaminess like this, you can overcook things like tofu or even potato. Dice up a potato nice and small. The natural potato starch in it will fall apart, and will also bring some body and some creamy texture into your soup. So yes, tofu, if you want it to retain its body though, get an extra firm. You might even press it between some heavy pots. Some people do that. I don't know. It seems to add just 30 minutes to my time. But dice it up, throw it in at the very end so that it doesn't have time to kind of fall apart.
And one just comment, chipotle might also pair well with the soup's creaminess.
Yes, absolutely. That one just made me excited. That one just came off the top of my head. So, okay, you guys, if there are any more questions? All right, let's go ahead and we're gonna finish this off for you. So I'm gonna take my cream, let's turn our heat off, and I'm just gonna kind of stir this in. Oh my goodness. Now we're talking here, right? Look at that. And now it changes right from that kind of, brown color, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But now it becomes that pretty creamy color that we know wild rice to be. There we go. Look at that. And that is going to change the texture some as well. And then we can hunt down that sachet, pull that out. I always kind of scrape down the sides because a lot of good flavor will cling to this cheesecloth. And I'm going to give it a little tap kind of against the side. Like that. Extract all that flavor. Okay, and this guy just goes away. And there we have it, you guys. Check it out. I can't wait to dig into this. All right, we are there. We made it. Any last minute questions? Little, voila.
Couple of this looks good. Can't wait to dig in.
Okay, awesome, you guys. Chef Jeremy here again. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. And awesome time hanging out with you. You guys were a super interactive group. Thank you for those questions and comments. I absolutely love it. I feed off of that. So thank you again. And enjoy this dish. If you didn't make it tonight, I hope you make it soon. All right, you guys, I'm signing off. But just for tonight, I'll see you next time. Take care.